This Filmmaker IQ lesson is sponsored by ICANN, award-winning designer, manufacturer, and distributor of professional video, film, and broadcast production equipment, and by Blackmagic Design, creating the world's highest quality solutions for feature film, post-production, and television broadcast industries.
Hi, welcome to FilmmakerIQ.com. I'm John Hess, and today we'll explore Hollywood's history of visual trickery with the backstory of modern green screen compositing. With cameras and computers everywhere in our modern world, it's easy to forget that the very first motion pictures were themselves essentially a special effect. It's here at the beginning of filmmaking that we'll start our journey, the close of the 19th century, with one of the world's first prolific filmmakers, a man who spent his life studying the art of illusion, Georges Méliès. In his 1898 film, Four Heads Are Better Than One, Méliès employs a visual trick that is the rudimentary beginnings of what we now think of as green screen compositing. That's the use of mats for multiple exposures. Compositing is a technique of combining different shots and elements into one image. The matte shot was the first compositing technique employed by early filmmakers such as Méliès. In his film, Méliès would black out part of the frame using a piece of glass with some black paint on it. This matte made it so no light would reach the film underneath so that it wouldn't get exposed. Then Méliès would rewind the film and this time matte out everything else and expose only the part of the frame that was under the matte earlier. The resulting double exposure could combine two or more different shots into one frame, and it was all done inside the camera. This matte technique was used again on Edwin S. Porter's 1903 The Great Train Robbery, but this time not as a magic trick, but as a means to create a larger world. Notice the train moving outside the window of the train station. Also the open door of the mail car with the scenery flying by in the background. Both of these shots were done using mattes and double exposures. Now the fair question to ask here is, why didn't they just shoot it for real in a real train station or in a real train car? Well, the answer to that is it was technically impossible at the time. Early orthochromatic film needed a lot of light, and the technology for efficient electronic lighting for film was still a decade or two away. And that's not even considering the inherent exposure problems of shooting an interior scene with a window in the shot. Even modern-day cameras have trouble with the brightness differences between interiors and exteriors. In order to make film behave the way that we experience the world, visual trickery had to be done. Now, as film grew up in the 1900s and 1910s, more techniques for augmenting sets and creating false realities would be developed. The glass shot was a technique of painting elements on a piece of glass, and then placing that glass between the subject and the camera, a sort of real-world compositing, which was refined by early filmmaker Norman Don, using it to augment sets to make them look much bigger and more elaborate without the costs of construction. But the problem with the glass shot was the paintings had to be done and ready on the set. Well, Norman Don solved this problem by painting the glass black and treating the shot like a matte shot. The matted film would then be transferred to a second camera where matte artists could take their time creating the matte paintings. This matte painting concept continues seeing use in the golden era of Hollywood and continues with us even in our modern digital world. The problem with mattes is the camera had to stay perfectly still and no action could cross the matte line, the hopefully invisible line between the live action and the matte painting. Now this is where the traveling matte came into place, the process patented by Frank Williams in 1918 and demonstrated here in F.W. Murnau's 1927 film Sunrise, was a black matting process which photographed subjects against a pure black background. The film would then be copied to increasingly high contrast negatives until the black and white silhouette emerged. This black and white silhouette was used as the matte, called a traveling matte, because it moved throughout the frame. This black back matte effect, which was called the Williams process, was used quite famously by John P. Fulton in 1933 for the film The Invisible Man. The shots where the Invisible Man was taking off his clothes was accomplished by photographing actor Claude Rains wearing a full black velvet suit standing against a black background. This effect was so memorable and so startling that it was used on follow-up sequels even after more effective processes had come along.
Put the handcuffs on. Reckon I handcuff a blooming shirt. Quick, get out of him!
The Williams process had some issues. For one, any shadow on the subject would be lost in the traveling matte. An alternative came about in 1925, invented by C. Dodge Dunning, which would eventually be called the Dunning process. This process used color lights, lighting the background screen blue and the foreground subjects in yellow. Then using dyes and filters, the blue and yellow light could be split apart to create the traveling matte. The Dunning process would first see use on King Kong in 1933. The problem with the Dunning process was it only worked with black and white film. Color film needed a new technique and would come in 1940 by special effects artist Larry Butler in The Thief of Baghdad.
That was the first wish, Master. 2 more remain. Name them.
Don't you hurry me. I've got to be careful. Oh, you know what I wish? Tell me, where's my friend Ahmad?
Master, to know that, you must look into the all-seeing eye.
And give me the eye.
Master, I can take you where it is, but not even I can steal it for you.
Steal? I'll see to that.
Little braggart, what have you ever stolen?
What haven't I? Teeth from his glove, ring from his finger, money from his purse, the scent of a genie.
And the tongue of a liar. But he who would steal the all-seeing eye from the very brow of the goddess must be neither a thief nor a braggart, but a hero.
I always wanted to be a hero. Come on.
Then catch on to my hair.
All right, but mind you, this is not my second wish yet. Now I'm rather helping you.
Yes, Master.
Using the 3-strip Technicolor process, Butler shot the subjects against a blue background. Blue was used because it was the farthest away from skin tones, and the blue film stock had the smallest grain. Taking the blue separation from the 3 Technicolor negatives, Butler was able to create a silhouette matte just like they did with Williams' process. Then, using an optical printer, a relatively new invention at the time that could combine multiple film strips into one, Butler would first remove the blue background from the foreground plate, use the negative of the traveling matte and remove the foreground space from the background plate, and then finally combining both the foreground plate and the background plate together. This blue screen technique won an Academy Award for Best Special Effects for Larry Butler in 1940, but it was not without its own inherent problems. Firstly, the process was extremely time-consuming, as it involved several steps with an optical printer. Secondly, it still had some edge issues, where a thin blue line was almost always visible in the shots. It also couldn't handle any fine details like hair or smoke or motion blur. Now, despite these limitations, the blue screen process was used extensively, including in such blockbusters as The 10 Commandments, in 1956. Hollywood kept experimenting with other variations on the blue screen process, including the ultraviolet matte as used in The Old Man and the Sea. But the real challenger to blue screen was created in the late 50s and credited to one of the giants in the world of compositing, Petrov Vlahos. Developed by Vlahos in the mid-50s and used extensively by Walt Disney Studios in the 60s and 70s, the sodium vapor process used actors who were lit normally standing in front of a white screen which was lit by powerful sodium vapor lights. Those are those orange lights you see on the street corner. A sodium vapor emits light in a very specific wavelength, averaging 589.3 nanometers and nothing else. Using a specially coated prism in an old 3-strip Technicolor camera, the very specific wavelength of that sodium vapor light was split off and captured onto special black and white film. This automatically created the black and white traveling matte. The remaining light would then be captured by the regular 3-strip Technicolor film, which was relatively unaffected by the yellow-orangish sodium vapor lights. This technique produced some of the best traveling mattes of the time, and was used by Disney first on the film The Parent Trap, and then The Absent-Minded Professor, both in 1961. Mary Poppins in 1964 demonstrated the capability of the sodium vapor process, winning an Academy Award for the best special effects. There was just one problem. Only one sodium vapor prism was ever made, so there was only one camera in the world that was capable of this process, and Disney owned that camera, and they didn't let it rent for cheap. In the late 50s, when MGM was ready to produce Ben-Hur in the MGM Camera 65 format, that's a 65mm film process, they turned to Petrov Vlahos, the inventor of the sodium vapor process, for help on the compositing. See, they didn't want the same problems that the Ten Commandments had with blue screen, but the sodium vapor process wouldn't work as the prisms it used were made for 35mm film, not 65mm. So Vlahos was asked to see if he could do something about trying to improve the quality of the blue screen process. Well, after 6 months of hard work, Vlahos had a discovery. And this is where it gets pretty complicated. See, most colors that aren't purely green or purely blue have equal amounts of blue and green in them. So when separating a matte from a blue screen, Vlahos used a green cancellation separation, or positive, and ran it through with the original color negative, exposing both pieces of film together under a blue light to create a blue difference matte. This matte was clear where the blue and green were the same. Then the blue separation positive was combined with the original negative and exposed under a red light to create a cover matte. This cover matte was applied back to the original color separation, except with the blue separation was replaced with a composite of the green and the blue difference matte, essentially a synthetic blue separation. Now, this complicated process required 12 film elements to get from the composite negative to the composite inner negative, but it was remarkable in the way it single-handedly solved the edge and fine detail problems that had plagued blue screen. It was so successful, in fact, that the process remained in popular use for almost 40 years. Developments like the microprocessor-controlled quad optical printer employed by Richard Edlund for The Empire Strikes Back made the process faster and more accurate. But the next big change to come would be in the form of digital. I've consciously avoided the term chroma-key, as historically the term only applied to video systems. Well, that's not the case anymore. In rudimentary video mixers, a keyer was a mathematical process that would take a range of colors in a video signal and make them transparent. This is, of course, a common effect in television newsrooms all around the world that use it for weather map special effects. Now, blue as a screen color was still predominant, but green started to take over as films began to getting the digital post-production treatment in the late 1990s. Why green? Well, basically green was easier and cheaper to light than blue. Green registers brighter on electronic displays, works well with outdoor keys where blue screen might match the sky, and the bold green color was less common in costumes than blue is. And now, as digital cameras are starting to replace film cameras, many digital sensors use what's called a Bayer pattern, which have twice the number of green photosites than red or blue to capture luminance. This makes modern digital cameras much more sensitive to the green part of the spectrum, making pulling a matte from a green screen a little easier. Blue is still commonly used, as are other colors, depending on the needs of the shot. So now with advanced software, motion-controlled cameras, chromakey, a term that has grown to encapsulate much more than the original video technique, can be used to insert backgrounds and set extensions in ways that Georges Méliès and Norman Don could only dream of. There are cynics today that believe modern film is too reliant on CGI, that we should return to a simpler form of real filmmaking. But as I hope you learned, that era never existed. Filmmakers from the very beginning have sought to push the medium with special effects. The undeniable truth about filmmaking is the only thing that matters is what's on that screen. From Edwin S. Porter's matted train station window to modern action spectacles, it's all about creating a window onto another world. A world where each of us can find our own dreams, our fears, and ourselves. All these effects we have are just tools to help us get there. And man, do we have some fantastic tools. So use them and make something great. I'm John Hess, and I'll see you at filmmakeriq.com.